In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. What is it to be a presbytera? I feel as if I'm about to dangerously expose myself. I hope no one is expecting deep spiritual insights. A presbytera is an ordinary human being fulfilling a vocation, trying to live an Orthodox life. Every parish, every priest, every presbytera or diaconissa is unique, as are the people who make up each community. Therefore, what I'm going to say is from my unique experiences. To me, there are three fundamentals to being a presbytera. The first one, to demonstrate the reality of God, the Holy Trinity, in your life. Second, support your husband, whether priest or deacon. And the third is to treat everyone equally. Now, first of all, I'm going to tell you a bit about my background because that makes me the person I am. And I hope that when you're thinking about your Christian lives, you will take your background into consideration and believe that it has all been a positive journey, even if it wasn't all pleasant. So, one grandfather was a farmer growing hops in Herefordshire. My father's father was an Anglican priest, first with the Indian Army, then during the Second World War they were in Lisbon, where part of their work was helping Jewish refugees get away to the US or Britain. During this time, my grandparents hardly had any news of my father. They didn't know whether he was dead or alive. My grandfather subsequently had rural parishes in Hereford, near Ledbury, and then in Devon. I remember Devon, where the huge freezing rectory doubled up for all parish functions. My grandmother was very devout and committed to her role. My grandfather would ride his bike round the villages. My father was a colonial administrative officer. So, before the beginning of World War II, he was sent to the Gilbert and Ellice Islands in the Pacific, from where he was captured by the Japanese and spent nearly 4 years in their prisons. He never blamed them for what he endured. After the war, he returned to the islands. Hence, I was born on a Pacific island. In 1994, he was posted to Uganda. My father was essentially interested in people and was a linguist. He had studied anthropology at university. He had experienced some extreme poverty in India, where he was born, and always wanted to help people. There were, of course, no aid charities at that time. He learnt to speak Gilbertese and then all the different languages of the provinces he served in Uganda. Far from being glamorous, this was hard, lonely work for a pay that only allowed home leave every 2 years. There were no schools in the smaller townships, so homeschooling was the norm. This didn't work for me. Much to my mother's distress, I would lie on the floor and have hysterics when expected to read and write. So my sister and I were sent to boarding school in England at the age of 7 and 8. We lived with a guardian in the holidays and when older with grandparents in Exeter or grandparents outside Malvern, only seeing our parents once a year, alternatively in Europe or in Uganda. The leaving of our parents was traumatic for us and for our parents, but my father had suffered worse things. The second boarding school we went to was a Roman Catholic convent before Vatican II. where I was introduced to a liturgical and spiritual life. At the age of 12, I started to pray that I would be a missionary, imagining myself in Uganda with in the bush. Moving quickly on, my parents left Uganda after the independence ceremonies, so after 6 years, we returned to living as a family. I went to teach training college where I learned some skills but never completed the course. I spent time in Switzerland as a companion to the son of a British diplomatic family with temporal lobe epilepsy. I worked for the Red Cross in British military hospitals as a welfare officer. By now, I had realized that if I was to marry, it needed to be to a committed Christian. While stationed in Aldershot, I met Father Stephen. I didn't know he was a believer. We were leaning over the same gate while taking part in a common interest in field sports. We learned a great deal from being involved with a controversial activity who were misunderstood by most of society. We were married 6 months later. Father Stephen was working as the manager of an important tree and shrub nursery in Woking. He had come across the Orthodox Church before I met him. He worked outside in all weathers and came home wet, cold, hungry, and muddy. When Father Stephen applied to train as an Anglican priest, he was made redundant by the nursery. I was heavily pregnant at the time, working at the local outpatient hospital, riding my bike to and fro. However, he managed to find work with manpower, erecting warehouse staging, and then ditch digging for Thames Water Authority. The 3-year training at Chichester Anglican Theological College was another huge learning curve. It was particularly hard for the families. Father Stephen and I had prayed the Western Office together, but he was now in the college chapel for his prayers. I started to research family prayers in various traditions, which proved less than helpful. Unbeknown to me, I set up an icon corner using Western illustrated prayer cards, where I prayed with my baby using prayers I had remembered from my convent days. During this time, I first encountered Orthodoxy, Paschal night at the Russian Cathedral Ennismore Gardens. It was mind-blowing. The people knew to whom they were praying and were comfortable. We had an infant failing to thrive, i.e., she was retrogressing and was diagnosed with celiac disease eventually at 10 months old. This was just before we moved to an Anglican parish in the rural diocese of Herefordshire, where Father Stephen served as the curate. I was saved from having a complete mental breakdown due to exhaustion by a clued-up locum GP. The experience left me very wary of certain warning signs. After 2.5 years, we moved to Minsterley, a few miles south of Shrewsbury. The people here were devout, serious, and noble. It became obvious to us that the Church of England had not got the spiritual tradition to lead them forward. Father Stephen was constantly borrowing traditions from the Roman Catholic or Orthodox churches. During Lent in 1985, the different denominations around Minsterley invited each other to a service and discussion. Bother the Baptists, consult the Congregationalists, mither the Methodists, ask the Anglicans, and rile the Romans. Each tradition told us why They weren't part of the other group. Finally, Father Stephen arranged for Archimandrite Barnabas from St. Elias Monastery to celebrate a liturgy in our small Anglican church. This was fatal for us. It was blatantly obvious where the truth lay. Of course, we had spent many months pondering our situation and finding out about Orthodoxy, attending the Saturday liturgies in Hereford when we could. But this was the catalyst for me. I wanted our children to grow up with the certainty that their belief in God, which could define their lives. The Church of England never seemed to be able to make up their minds about so many issues: marriage and divorce, same-sex partners, abortion, fetal experimentation, let alone the resurrection and the virgin birth. A few weeks later, a parishioner told the Bishop of Hereford that we were thinking we might have to become Orthodox one day. On the 4th of May, 1985, the bishop visited us. He could not conceive that anybody would want to leave the Church of England, so made all sorts of accusations. He even sent a GP to check to see whether Father Stephen had gone mad and should be sectioned. Father Stephen was suspended there and then, though he was allowed to conduct a wedding of a high society family on the Saturday. It was while he was attending the wedding that I discovered our 3 small children had nits. I managed to persuade a disgruntled ex-parishioner to look after the children while I drove to the doctor's surgery in the next village. We had a battered old VW camper van, which, to add to the horror of the situation, sounded the alarm as I bumped down the country lanes. As if the disgrace we were in wasn't enough. Of course, it was all over the local papers. Father Stephen had been an Anglican clergyman for 5 years. We lost our home and our income. We were extremely lucky to have Father Barnabas relatively close. He lent us some money towards buying somewhere to live. We found a very cheap 4-storey house in Welshpool with 2 rooms on each floor. It was in a bad state with no central heating, but it did have a tiny garden. Fortunately, we have been given 3 months to move out of the vicarage while we made it habitable. We were ostracized by most of the parishioners, lost many of our friends, and upset our families. Those 3 months were very unpleasant. However, our journey to Orthodoxy had begun. We'd talked a lot about what we could do. No one was going to employ a sacked clergyman with an out-of-date HND in agriculture. So we started a publishing company called Stylite Publishing and produced the magazine Orthodox Outlook. In fact, we had already planned to do this, but were catapulted into the situation. Looking back, it was a good idea, but we had no capital to rely on, and each magazine we sold had to cover the costs. We still had to pay for gas, electricity, poll tax, school uniforms, etc. We bought church artifacts, light and life books, and icon prints, which we mounted ourselves, and sold them by mail order at a small profit. The publishing business was killed off by a recession in 1991. There were very few English-speaking Orthodox in Britain at that time, added to which we spent many hours on the phone answering all the questions about the Orthodox Church. We performed the role of a missionary information centre. We were received into the Orthodox Church on St. Nestor's Day, 27th of October, 1985, to our immense relief. Although there were many stresses and anxieties, it was very exciting. I could empathize with Father Nikolai at the monastery at Toleshant Nights when he told a few of us of St. Sophrony and his nuns surviving on nettles and comfrey when they first came to Britain. We had the same experience. We occasionally attended a celebration with Archbishop Methodios, who would present me with a collection. It was usually exactly the amount we needed to pay for an outstanding bill or tax the car. We were miles from any other Orthodox apart from Father Barnabas's tiny monastery. We had to find out everything ourselves, how the services were conducted, about prayers at home, the traditions, what we needed. The early Orthodox outlooks reflect this period. There was a Greek Cypriot family living in Shrewsbury at that time, of whom one, Eleni Kyriakou, had been praying that there should be an Orthodox church where she could go and understand the liturgy. The family had lived in Coventry, served by Archimandrite John Maitland-Moyer and Father Kirill Leret. Father Barnabas heard about this, so it wasn't long before, with the help of Father Alban Barter in Chester and Father Barnabas, we looked for a premises, wrote to all those in the telephone directory with Greek names, and planned a first liturgy in September 1986. Father Stephen was summoned to London to see Archbishop Methodios. He was told he had committed a grave sin of rejecting his calling to the priesthood. Archbishop Methodios ordained Father Stephen deacon on the 21st of December and priest on the 28th of December 1986, much to the criticism of many people. From that time on, I was a presbytera. So, the first point, demonstrate the reality of God, the Holy Trinity, in your life. From the very first, we were able to go to the liturgy every Sunday, either in the tiny monastery chapel that was a converted garage, or to the new mission in Chester, which we had helped Father Alban launch. This was to become our basic rule from then on. Father Stephen was able to go to the vigil on Saturday evenings and learn how the services worked. We said prayers at home in our icon corner. Sometimes this was hilarious. 6 of us saying the prayer of St. Ephraim with prostrations in the small living room with children who were acting the fool. We came to the conclusion on many occasions that God had a sense of humor. If we didn't say them for any reason, it was the children who brought us back into line. We made a point of blessing our food, and on one of our trips between Minsterley and Welshpool before we were Orthodox, we stopped at the Little Chef in Buttington. The children accused us of not blessing the food and refused to eat until it had been blessed, much to our embarrassment. This was the first time we had ever prayed this way in public. Now it would be unthinkable not to do so. Study. The 2 of us set apart one evening a week to study the Fathers. This has gone on ever since, with many people joining into this to this day. Study is very important for the spiritual growth of the individual and of the community. We realize the need for people to have the opportunity to learn more about their faith and conceive the idea of a monthly course for individuals so that they would have more confidence to teach or answer the many questions we were being faced with. Archbishop Gregorius gave a blessing for the Midland Seminary to start. I was a guinea pig for 7 years, but it made a huge difference to me. Early on, we built a very small church in our garden so that we could maintain the services when nowhere else was available. This was invaluable at the start of our community. For the Lent and Paschal services, we were also able to celebrate great feasts. It was where we could keep the holy vessels, service books, candles, etc., while we were borrowing churches. The maximum it could fit was 17. We learnt the importance of hospitality. This was not always easy. We also went on pilgrimages, looking for the many forgotten holy sites in Wales. This sometimes involved scrambling through bushes and brambles, other times blackberry picking. Our family were very tolerant, but we were able to extend this to Greece and visit the shrine of St. Nectarius on Aegina, which was a wonderful experience. It was important to pray for people, even then there were many miracles. On one occasion, an envelope arrived from a woman's monastery in France. We were unaware of what it contained until much later when we opened the envelope. Inside was cotton wool soaked in myrrh from a miraculous icon to anoint a small boy suffering from cancer. The scent of lilies completely filled the house. And we took it to the church, the service we were doing on the Sunday, and again, all the way in the car we could smell it, and all the way in the church. Then we sent it up to Chester, where the boy was very ill. Realizing that our children were very isolated and needed to have other Orthodox to relate to, we were extremely happy when GOIGB summer youth camps began to be established in the Archdiocese. This became the highlight of their year, and they brought back useful ideas to our growing community. The needs of our children in the growing parish to learn their faith led us to start catechetical work. This was very haphazard and unsuccessful at first. However, with the help and enthusiasm of Fotini Pierce of blessed memory, we devised the Varangian Guard Youth Club, which after 25 years is still going stronger and getting even stronger. Right, support your husband. This section may be more relevant to a clergy family, but much applies to any other Orthodox Christian. If God has chosen you as his diaconessa or presbytera, this is not by accident. Talk about what ordination might mean with your husband and with your family, and go on talking about it. A man cannot be ordained if his wife does not give permission. You may accept this situation rationally, but it does not follow that often, and especially to begin with, there will not be resentment about your husband being shared between you, God, and the parishioners. So after Father Stephen was ordained, he was often away serving other communities or training for a day job. This caused a lot of difficulties, and I would work myself up into a very bad mood so that I had not a good word to say to him when he got home. After a while, I realized that this was of the devil, and I would say, "Get behind me, Satan," while making the sign of the cross, and have some holy water, and the mood immediately changed. We were starting a community from scratch. So, how were we going to do this? It involved lots of planning and conversations and shared actions. Luckily, we were a team. For instance, On at least 4 occasions in different towns, we got in the car and went round a town to all the crosses marked on the map to find a church that might be possible for us to use. In Shrewsbury, we discovered that Frankwell Methodist Chapel did not have a service on Sunday morning, so we obtained permission to use it. This worked for a while, but some Sundays there was a Sunday school run on the other side of a wooden screen with drums, other percussion, and clatter that lasted until the great entry. We had to erect everything, move loads of chairs, and put them all back before we left. On one occasion, this involved moving all the harvest festival decorations and produce, and then trying to remember where to put them back. Fortunately, we had a large car in which we could pack vestments, vessels, icons, candles, and the portable holy table. So I became front of house manager, which I could not have done if I had been running the choir. It is important to really know your faith so that you can answer the question that will come at you, some of which may be really strange. You need to be discerning. You may have to deal with a crisis on the phone. You may be told things in confidence, which it may not be helpful to pass on to your husband. You need to have a relationship so that you can protect your husband from unnecessary criticism, unnecessary phone calls, overzealous and demanding parishioners, even warning them of potential sexual dangers and safeguarding issues. Be ready to be a go-between, but also ready to give an answer immediately. For example, should someone receive communion? Should they be anointed after the service? It is important to ask yourself the question, what would Christ have done in this situation? It's important to balance your needs, the needs of your family, with the demands of the parishioners, and your family comes first. Saturdays and Sundays are extremely hard work. This can be a catalyst for teenage children to reject the church, especially if their homes are full of other people and they never have quality time with their parents. You and your husband are already monosyllabic after returning from the Sunday liturgy and then have to get lunch for the family. If there are things you need to say to your husband, choose your moment. For instance, do not bring up controversial issues on Sunday morning before you go to church, and do not let him do that either, or that he is developing an odd habit while serving the liturgy. Try to treat everyone equally. This is much harder than you think. We don't choose the people who join our communities. God sends them. Every Orthodox Christian is unique and singular. Quite a few have turned up to our community because no other denomination can deal with them. Invariably, when starting a new parish, there will be about 12 of you before someone very difficult will be sent along. Once a parish gets larger, it's much easier to cope. Just as in a family, each individual must be loved unconditionally. I've always tried to greet anyone who comes to our church so that they feel welcome. Some will be shy and retiring, hoping to slip out without being noticed. However, if they felt cared about, they will have had a more positive experience. If they have never been to an Orthodox church before, you may have the Archdiocese leaflet or a guide to the church for them to take away. They will remember a friendly smile and that they had been spoken to, or if they had been ignored. There will be those who are lonely or just attention seekers, those with endless questions, those who continually need reassuring, butterflies who flit away at the first hurdle. Some will be desperate for approval or to be best buddies, but disappear if there are difficulties or even foment them themselves. Others come, help out, take responsibilities without being asked. Don't overlook them. We had someone who suffered a disastrous LSD trip, the only time she ever took the drug. She was okay until she had her first child. Then she became extremely eccentric. At the consecration of our church, dedicated to the 318 Holy Fathers of the First Ecumenical Council in 1997, she lay down in the queue for communion. People were starting to freak out. So I made sure everyone calmly walked round her or over her until nearly everyone had received the holy gifts. Then I told her that she would miss out unless she got up, which she did. We had a sad person who couldn't cope being placed second in the National Junior Gymnastic competition. He took to drink at a very young age. He was inclined to stand in front of an icon on one leg and shout the Jesus prayer. On one occasion at Ennismore Gardens, he was praying, "O Lord, set me on fire. O Lord, set me on fire," when suddenly people started hitting him on the back. He'd been standing too close to the candlestand with the candlestand behind him. God had answered his prayer. He had literally been set on fire. I've got through that rather quicker than I expected. So that's all I was going to say. If anybody has questions, I'll answer them. Okay.
I just want to thank you very much for sharing all of that and for your honesty in telling us so much. You know, none of us knew how much you've been through in order to give us what you have, you know, and be such a terrific presbyter for us. So just thank you.
Okay. Well, it's been an amazing, exciting time. And we couldn't have done it without anybody else there. We'd have gone back into the hole.
Yes.
So, Presbytera, I would like to thank you also, like Sister Thevuli, for all the work that you do. You are absolutely fantastic. My question would be, have there been any moments during your ministry in which you have felt, I just want to give up?
Yes, there have. I don't know whether I can think of any specific ones. I think the most disappointing thing is that people come, especially in the early days, and you're desperate for some help. So you get them to do all sorts of things, and then they let you down. And things like you need somebody to drive a minibus, and they promise they're going to do that, and then on the morning they don't, to get to Holywell or somewhere. There have been certain times, but you have to have perseverance and patience and endurance.
Right, Mellinger. First of all, thank you, Catherine. I thought that was a very inspiring talk. There were so many little lessons in that for all of us. You were referring to trust when you spoke to Jesse, and I wondered, had you noticed you'd had a developing trust as you progressed through all those steps and stages in life? Is it something that you found
Yes.
develops?
Well, I think our time in Welshpool, to begin with, it felt as if we were trying to squeeze through the eye of a needle. And we also felt that we had to hit rock bottom before we actually came up again. And it was a very, very difficult time. Luckily, it just worked out in the end. So, glory to God.
Thank you. I don't know whether you remember meeting me, but we have met once before.
I do remember. Yes.
And I decided that Shrewsbury was my favourite church after that.
Unfortunately, we don't use the little church all the time. So we're growing out of it now.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Presbytera Catherine, for the lovely talk and for everything you do for us in Shrewsbury. And Steve says from him too. I find myself quite often feeling terrible about the amount of work we all make for you. And I just want to ask, what can we do to make it easier for you at church?
I think you're doing a wonderful job already.
So, I don't know about that, but thanks.
I really do feel that I'm beginning to be able to step down, and that there are plenty of people there who can just get on with things. I don't have to worry about things apart from checking that the heating's off at church at St. Julian's and the lights are off, which didn't happen last night. But it's always a progressive thing. So if you see something needing to be done, do it. Otherwise, you're doing a great job already. You're there, you're helping with lots of things. So just take your time and see what goes on, and where you can fill a space or do a job, just get in there.
Thank you.
Hello.
Oh,
can you hear me?
Are you there, Claire?
Yes. So thanks, Mum. Can you tell us a bit about the bigger picture of being a presbyter in England? Because I expect that there's some people listening who want to know whether there's a network or something like that.
Well, funnily enough, the Archbishop had a clergy wives get together for 2 nights a couple of weeks ago. So we met up there were 17 of us, which the Archbishop wasn't very pleased about, but he probably doesn't really realize that so many people have got jobs that they have to support their husbands. So hopefully that will grow. But up till now, there hasn't been any sort of support from other presbyteries apart from local ones that we've known. We used to meet up occasionally, a few of us, 3 or 4, a few years ago. Obviously, we keep in contact with each other, the ones that we know, not as often as we should, though. I think it's very important that the presbyteries do keep in contact, and I'm really pleased that the people who were at this clergy wives group conference have all got contact details, and we've got our own WhatsApp group now. So we get some input from each other, which, yes, Claire, that was, it could be better. Yeah, it needs to be done, just as the priests need support from each other, and they don't get it. We're miles away from other clergy families and priests' wives and priests. In Birmingham, there's quite a few of them all get together there. Not so many priests' wives, but plenty of clergy. And it does sometimes feel very isolated. And you feel as if you're carrying everything on your shoulders. Is that Tamara? No?
Oh, it's me. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you.
Sorry,
Oh, my.
it's a strange name because I just logged into Gmail and YouTube, so it's like it comes up with the name on YouTube. So, but, I wondered, has the church got a prescription for a presbytery? Is there a prescribed role and duties for a presbytery, or is it just something that sort of happens when you take on the job? When you're married to a priest, you just, oh, there's this to do and that to do, and I need to do this, or has the church got something? This is sort of, you know, when Constantine sort of called the First Ecumenical Council, was the first call, right, what do we do with presbyterians? What's their job? It was laid down in the First Ecumenical Council, or is there nothing?
There's nothing. No, there's really nothing. And if you want to have your own career, there's nothing to say that you shouldn't. I think some of the parishioners might, depending on what their experience has been before, if they're used to having a presbyter who's around all the time, then that might prove difficult for them. But I think that the presbytera must be allowed to do what she can. If she's got young children, her husband may not be earning anything, she may have to work. So I think that it's the parish's responsibility to make sure that they get stuck in and do a lot of the stuff that it doesn't have to be done by a presbytera. It was just that I happened to be pretty well the only person there. So I just had to do it and haven't stopped. No, it would be good to have some sort of code. And very often, and this came out in the clergy wives group that we had the other day, that people feel that their children are badly behaved and criticized, but they're only children, and they've probably been in church for probably even an hour before everybody else, and they probably have to be the last ones to go home as well. So I feel for them, although I was very cross with my own children.
Well, that's probably reassuring for Jessie anyway. She doesn't actually have to do anything.
No, she doesn't have to do anything. I would say it would be useful if she was there, but otherwise, no.
Hello, Presbytera Catherine. For those of you who don't know, although I'm showing as Val Sanders, I'm actually Anna Sanders from the Chester parish. I just want to say it was lovely to hear your talk, Catherine. And I owe you a huge debt, because when my husband was ordained, he's now Father Pancratius, Catherine was my only support as a new presbytera. And looking back on the years, I don't know how she put up with me, to be honest, but my point is that I think it's really important that those of us who have become Presbyterians and have been for a considerable period of time are there and able to give support to the new, younger Presbyterians. It is a very hard position to work out who you are and what you do. But the clergy-wise retreat was a good example of that starting. Some of the talk that we had with some of the younger ones and reminded me of the issues and the problems that I had in the early years. We lived some distance from Chester, so that wasn't easy. I had children. My husband initially was still in employment. There were all sorts of things, all of which we overcame. But yeah, I think that's, I'm sure, I imagine you would agree with me there, Catherine, but I do think we need to encourage Presbyterians to be in touch with each other.
I think that's very important. And now, even more so, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's possible now. Everything we didn't, at one point, we couldn't even afford a phone. So, it's, things have changed.
Yeah.
For the better, some of them. Yes. Yeah. Hello, Maria. No, we can't hear you.
It's been ages since I used it. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you, Catherine, very much for this very, very nice talk. Very inspiring. And it was a little bit of Karen Blixen and Uganda, Africa, out of Africa, and a handbook for Presbyterians. And I think you've covered all the questions that I had. If someone is new to this role and wants to have like a quick idea, it covered everything. The good times, the bad times, the difficulties, everything. And everything on the spiritual angle always. Yes, I have to add a little bit on what you said about the new group that we formed last time with the initiative of the Archbishop.
Yeah,
which is really good. I found it it was a bit far for me, but I'm really glad that I came.
Yeah.
It was very informative and reinforced my my inspiration and my will, and it made me feel stronger.
Good.
But yeah, it's yes, and I think it's really good to stay connected.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll keep doing that.
Yes, I know. You mentioned just a question. You mentioned earlier that you study the fathers.
Yes.
Well, which is really helpful. How do you do this? Because you said you were doing this in the past and you're still doing it. Can you tell us how you do it?
Yeah. So when we first started, it was just Father Stephen and myself. So we decided that on a Tuesday night between, I think it was probably 7:30 and 8:30, we would look at a father. And we started off with St. Cyril of Jerusalem and his catechetical talks. And we just read through the books, just not too fast. If there was something that we wanted to look up in by biblical reference or something else we didn't know about, Father Stephen has a good library, so we were able to trace back some of the things. That was a very good book for us to start because we really knew nothing. And then gradually, when Fodini was received in Welshpool, she joined us. And sometimes we even had non-Orthodox because we came across people in Welshpool. That didn't really work very well. But we just made a point of doing it. And then gradually, now we do it on Zoom. We started doing that in COVID. And because people are joining from all over the place, North Wales, Worcester, all sorts of places, it works better on the Zoom. And we still just read a book. At the moment, we're reading St. John Chrysostom on the priesthood. Before that, what did we read? We were reading some Old Testament prophets, minor prophets. So we just pick something, and then Sister Theovuli can tell us more about that, but just start, and then do other people will join. We used to have it in our house. That wasn't so easy when children were around, especially in holiday times. So just get started. Pick a book out of the shelf and open it and just read your way through it. If you don't get on with it, just drop that one and try another one. We've tried all sorts of things and read all sorts of things.
Thank you.
Okay.
So another question I wanted to ask is, have you ever had to quell any rebellions you might have had from your own children as they were growing up? Questions about faith, about practicing that faith and furthering on in that faith.
Yes. I think the three older children, they were so excited about becoming Orthodox. I have to ask Claire if she agrees, that everything was fresh and new, and it was tedious because we had to pile in the car. Everything had to be piled into the car and taken back, and they were always the last and the first. And but I think the youth camps really made it for them. And now that there are so many more children going to the youth camps, I think this is just wonderful. Our youngest daughter, Alice, had much more struggle. She wanted to be like all the others, and she, being on her own, because she was much younger, it was more difficult for her to go to church and be dragged along. She didn't have the companionship of the others. What would you say, Claire? Are you there?
I agree with you. I remember there was one day when I said, "Oh, please, can we just stop talking about Orthodoxy at the table? Just talk about something else."
Yes.
And it just wasn't. And I just realised that we just had to. That was just how it was. And so I accepted it.
Yeah. There was one occasion when, I hope you don't mind me telling this, Claire, when they were probably about 8 and 10, or maybe 7 and 9, two older ones, when Claire said after prayers, "I sometimes feel as if it's just a dream and God isn't real." And I remember Hugh coming down absolutely with full force saying, "Don't be ridiculous, of course it's real." And from that, his faith has actually strengthened, well, certainly mine. It was hard. It is hard. But it's hard for everybody, especially if you decide that you're going to have a particular rule. You must try and keep it. Okay?
So thank you very much, Presbytera. And also, may I extend my greetings to Dave, my ex-cat, over there.
Well, I was just going to take you up on the point you made about the books, which are great fun, and which were originally you invited more of us into Fox Cottage,
Yeah.
where we had Chinese tea. Yeah, I miss that. And
We
now
wouldn't fit in now.
Hmm?
We wouldn't fit in now.
No, we wouldn't fit in. So now we have it on Zoom, and we do have a WhatsApp group just in the last couple of weeks, simply because people were asking where to get the book for the next set of for the next sessions, and it is Holy Father's Reading Room.
Yeah.
So it's been very useful for people, I think, working out what they're doing and when they're doing it and so on.
Yeah. We have two twice a week. So on a Tuesday evening and a Thursday morning for those who can't manage an evening. So we're getting through quite a lot of stuff.
And Thursday we can meet in person.
Oh, yes. We
And
meet.
it has been great fun trying to get to grips with Dionysius, the pseudo-Areopagite. Yeah,
Yes.
that's been fascinating.
Yes.
But, very good, though, very worthwhile.
Okay. Well, thank you.